Back in the times of slavery in America, white wives, who could not get attention from their white husbands, and mistresses had the wildest desires. They would establish sexual relationships with their black male slaves. Often, they even felt attracted by black slaves who were adult boys, yet to be married or used in slave breeding farms. However, nobody knows how black male slaves, both young and old, were seduced to have sexual relationships. Because the white women were in positions of authority, it was highly unlikely that black male slaves would ever think of having sexual encounters with them. That's when there were two options for the white wives. Either they could force black male slaves to have a sexual encounter once in a while against their will and devoid of any intimacy. Or white wives could play tactically a long-term game where they will seduce black male slaves to ultimately get their intimacy and attention during sexual encounters. It was like giving a superficial sense of freedom to the black male slaves so they could feel attracted to the white women and mistresses. After that, everything would speed up, and white women would get what they always wanted: sexual pleasure and satisfaction from young and energetic black slaves. But how did the seduction happen? In what ways did white wives and mistresses seduce both young and married black male slaves? The book named They Were Her Property talks in depth about it. In this video, let's know about that.
The Black History Archives.
White wives of white husbands wanted to seduce black male slaves. However, they wanted to do so strategically. In other words, they did not just want to try and fail. They wanted to succeed so that whatever they did brought results. In the first step, white wives would isolate black male slaves, especially the young ones. This tactic was not merely incidental, but a calculated strategy employed by white women to undermine the social bonds and cultural ties that could provide enslaved people with solidarity and support. By severing these connections, white women slave owners aimed to cultivate a state of dependence among the black male slaves they were attracted to, ensuring that their primary interactions and emotional sustenance came from them only. Black male slaves were assigned living quarters and work duties that minimized opportunities for communal gatherings, further isolating them from each other and reinforcing their dependence on white wives. Once isolated, white women engaged in behaviors aimed at simulating concern and care for the well-being of enslaved men. This pretense of compassion served a dual purpose. Firstly, it created a facade of benevolence and kindness that obscured the harsh realities of slavery, and secondly, it manipulated the emotional vulnerabilities of black enslaved men who lacked familial support and community ties. A common method involved offering flattery and praise designed to make the enslaved man feel valued and esteemed. This could involve compliments on his physical appearance, skills, or qualities that the white woman deemed desirable. By elevating his status within the plantation hierarchy, she sought to cultivate loyalty and gratitude, deepening his emotional dependence on her validation and favor. This was a classic technique that always worked. Another tactic was faking interest in the personal life and experiences of the black male slave. This could take the form of asking about his background, interests, or aspirations, creating an illusion of genuine curiosity and concern. Through these interactions, the white woman aimed to establish a fabricated connection that obscured the inherent power imbalance between them. These manipulative interactions were meticulously calculated to exploit the isolation and emotional vulnerability imposed on enslaved men. Stripped of meaningful social connections and support networks, they became more susceptible to manipulation and coercion under the guise of care and benevolence. The faked interest and flattery not only reinforced the white woman's control over the enslaved man, but also perpetuated a deceptive narrative of a paternalistic relationship that justified her authority and exploitation. In both isolating and giving false hopes, the white woman wanted the black male slave to only be surrounded by her, with no other woman around. In this way, he was to become more open, finding that no one was around and that the white wife of his master was the only female he would have interaction with. Then, white women would find a place that could guarantee privacy. Here's a reminder to please support us so we can make more videos for you by subscribing to our channel and giving the video a like. We want to build a strong community, and we need your support. Let's continue now. These secluded spaces, often within the household or during specific tasks, were carefully selected to ensure secrecy and avoid detection. For instance, a white woman might assign a young black male slave to work in isolated areas of the household, such as cleaning or maintenance of unused rooms. This provided her with chances to follow him into these private settings under the guise of supervision or casual conversation. Once alone, she could initiate physical contact or suggestive behavior aimed at seduction. In the context of slavery, where black male slaves were dehumanized and denied their rights, white women felt empowered to disregard their humanity. This could involve provocative actions like exposing parts of their body, such as legs, to gauge the reactions of the black male slaves. Often, the bare legs would be opened before the black male slave. Even white women would change clothes in the same room, giving an impression that they did not bother if the black male slave was there. However, this action was deliberate to seduce the slave. These overt gestures signaled her desires and exploited the power dynamics inherent in their relationship. Beyond physical actions, white women used subtle verbal cues and innuendos to convey their intentions discreetly. This might include flirtatious remarks, suggestive comments, or even explicit propositions, exploiting the vulnerability and lack of agency experienced by black male slaves. These verbal tactics were designed to allure and manipulate, leveraging the unequal power dynamic to elicit compliance without genuine consent. Additionally, symbolic gestures played a role in this manipulation. White women might offer gifts or tokens of affection to create a sense of indebtedness in the enslaved man, reinforcing his emotional dependence on her and justifying her actions within the skewed power structure of slavery. This was followed by initiating physical contact under the guise of harmless intentions. These actions were meticulously designed to blur boundaries and progress toward overt sexual advances. Initially, white women employed subtle physical contact as a means of testing boundaries and asserting their dominance. They would purposefully brush against black male slaves or engage in accidental touches during daily interactions. This close proximity aimed to normalize their presence and initiate a level of physical intimacy that could later be exploited. For instance, while a black male slave worked or performed tasks, a white woman would position herself nearby, creating opportunities for physical contact. By positioning herself where incidental touching could occur, she would initiate contact under the guise of innocent proximity. Furthermore, white women sometimes escalated these actions by touching black male slaves in more intimate or inappropriate places, such as their arms, shoulders, or even more private areas. This exploitation of physical contact capitalized on their position of power and the subservient status of enslaved men. Such behaviors often stemmed from a sense of excitement or desire, further highlighting the dehumanizing nature of their interactions. As these interactions progressed, white women would move from seemingly harmless touches to overtly sexual advances. This transition was facilitated by the inherent power imbalances of slavery, where black male slaves had limited agency. The acts of seduction were strengthened by suggestive communication. After initiating physical exploitation, white women during slavery frequently turned to suggestive communication as a method to further seduce black male slaves, particularly focusing on younger black male slaves. This approach capitalized on the established power dynamics where white women were seen as superior and out of reach for black male slaves, reinforcing their subordinate status. Verbal seduction involved white women conveying messages that emphasized their perceived superiority and attractiveness. They exploited societal norms that elevated white women to heights, presenting them as unattainable by black men no matter their efforts. This manipulation was a deliberate tactic to maintain control within the plantation hierarchy. For young black male slaves, especially those who hadn't fully grasped the extent of their oppression, white women insinuated that they now had access to something unimaginable: the chance for intimate encounters with beautiful, tender, and caring white women. This suggestion was framed as a rare privilege and a remarkable opportunity within their confined lives. White women used their authority and societal norms to lure and manipulate black male slaves into believing that these encounters were not only feasible, but also desirable and advantageous. By positioning themselves as benevolent grantors of these opportunities, white women further solidified their dominance and influence over the enslaved individuals. This form of suggestive communication exploited the psychological vulnerabilities of young black male slaves who lacked agency and were conditioned to defer to white authority figures. The promise of intimacy with white women served to reinforce the existing power imbalance and perpetuate the myth of white superiority. All this ultimately seduced black male slaves enough to encourage them into sexual relationships. White women got what they always wanted. That was full satisfaction from black male slaves, who would forget for an instant that they were slaves and would please white women fully. What do you think? In what more ways did white wives and mistresses seduce black male slaves? Isn't it true that the subtle acts of seduction were effective, given that white wives were considered superior? In the comment section right below, share your thoughts on whether black male slaves could refuse to have sexual relationships with the white wives of their white masters. Would you like us to make more videos? If yes, please support us by subscribing to the Black History Archives and clicking the bell icon. You can check out more videos on our channel too.